is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Gerald Post, who is a veterinary medicine doctor, and you specialize in oncology. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So we have lots, we're dog lovers here, so we have lots to ask you. When did your love for animals start?
I was 3.
You were 3 and you remember it?
Correct. So since I was 3, I wanted to be a veterinarian. At first, I wanted to take care of the dinosaurs until I learned that they were all gone.
Because as a little boy, you played with dinosaurs.
Absolutely. And then it morphed into dogs and cats and wild animals.
All right, so along the way, you decided that oncology was going to be your specialty, and you opened up a center for that in Norwalk.
Correct.
How did that come about?
So originally I went to vet school to do zoo animal medicine and worked at the
And why zoos? Because you worked at a zoo?
Nope. So I fell in love with tigers, I think, when I was 8 years old. I read George Challer's The Deer and the Tiger and just absolutely fell in love with the animal. I thought it was spectacularly beautiful and amazingly powerful, and I just thought that was the ultimate animal on the planet. And so I wanted to work with them. I went to vet school in Minnesota, and one of the world's leading researchers at the time was at the Minnesota Zoo. And so every Tuesday I would ditch class and go help him do research on tigers. And worked at the National Zoo for a little bit, worked at the Bronx Zoo for a little bit. And then after I graduated vet school, I spent a year at the Animal Medical Center in New York City doing an internship. And I fell in love with diagnostics. And at a zoo, oftentimes you don't do a whole lot of diagnostics because sometimes it's more dangerous to sedate the animal to get blood, or sedate the animal to do x-rays, or to handle the animal to get blood or x-rays. And so I took a year off, decided what I wanted to do, and I fell in love with oncology. And I really realized at that time that it wasn't saving individual wild animals that was my love, it was conserving species that was my love. So I started to do oncology for small animals, built up my practice, and then when I was able, I went back to school and got a master's degree in conservation biology.
Now, at the time that you started looking at oncology in animals, there weren't a lot of folks doing that.
No.
How many were doing that?
Less than 50. Probably less than 20 at the time. The first veterinary oncologist was board certified in 1988, which was the year I graduated vet school.
And so where did you go to be mentored, really, when there weren't that many folks around?
So I went to the Animal Medical Center, who had a number of board certified oncologists and a very, very excellent program for a 2-year residency in oncology after my internship. And became board certified in oncology in 1992. So
there are about 400 of you now, which the field has grown, as you say, unfortunately. Right. You opened up the VCCC in Norwalk to treat animals, dogs, cats, all kinds of things with cancer? Correct.
So mostly we treat dogs and cats at the center. We've treated birds, we've treated reptiles. When the Beardsley Zoo has a question or the Bronx Zoo has a question about cancer in an animal, we get a call. But the majority of our work is in dogs and cats.
And what's interesting is that dog cancers emulate sometimes human cancer, so there is a connection here. What have you found over the years as you've worked with your cancers and dogs?
So you're talking about a passion of mine, which is comparative oncology. So looking at the cancers in dogs and cats and people and evaluating them, studying them to help not only people or cats or dogs, but help each other. So early on in my career, I would spend some time at Memorial Sloan Kettering during my residency, and I saw that they were getting some of the same chemotherapies that I was using. Their patients had the same cancers that my patients had. The reactions to chemotherapy were similar. And one of the advantages and disadvantages of working with dogs and cats is they live what's called a compressed lifespan. And so instead of living 100 years, if you're a person, you live 10 years or 15 years. And so you can see how their cancers evolve over time, or how their treatments do in a much shorter period of time. So let's say, you know, your dog, God forbid, gets cancer. We treat. We see how that treatment does. It's not going to take 10 years, 20 years to see how that treatment, if it works or doesn't work. It's going to take 1 year. And so by studying that and then taking that information and applying it to people, that's my patent.
Do you work back and forth with Sloan Kettering and other cancer hospitals and with humans? Are they interested in what you're doing?
So they are. So 1999, I started a foundation called Animal Cancer Foundation. And our goal is to raise money and awareness of comparative oncology. And I have seen the tremendous growth and interest in this field over the past 20 years. It's really been heartwarming about how receptive physicians, researchers, even pharma companies are becoming to this concept.
What woke them up?
A whole group of veterinary oncologists who would
just kept hammering away at this?
Pretty much, yes.
And they said, oh gosh, there are similarities here.
Correct, correct. I just read a recent report that unfortunately still the success rate of cancer drugs in people, if you started a phase 1 and you go to evaluate how many of those actually become accepted or successes, it's 3.8%. It's the lowest of any medical discipline. Cardiology is better, infectious disease is better. And so I hope that's a wake-up call to let them know, hey, maybe your model is wrong. Right now, they're just using mouse models. Well,
right.
If you're a mouse and you get cancer, we can cure you. That obviously hasn't translated into our ability to cure people. And so what my hope is utilize not only the mouse model, but incorporate into that the dog and the cat model. So look at how dogs and cats who get spontaneous cancer, in other words, we don't give dogs and cats cancer and then study it. We treat dogs and cats with spontaneous cancer, so they get cancers the same way people do, just by living.
Where are the cancers coming from? Do we have any idea? Is it environmental? Is it dog food? Is it, what is it?
So some cancers are environmental, probably about 30 or 40% relating to our environment, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink. Most cancers, at their very nature, are genetic. So there's a mutation that occurs, whether it's a spontaneous mutation, whether your body just has a genetic risk factor for developing mutations. And most, not all cancers are from aging. So as we age, as our cells divide more and more and more frequently, they develop and accrue more and more genetic mutations. And sometimes our bodies are really good at ridding those mutated cells out of our body, but sometimes they get past our defenses and cancer develops.
Are there more cancers over the lifetime that you've spent doing what you do? Are there more cancers in dogs and cats now than there were before?
I believe so. So it's a difficult question to answer for a couple of reasons, but I'll tell you the short answer is yes. The long answer is people are now treating their pets like family, and so they go to the veterinarian more. Veterinarians are getting better, our diagnostics are getting better, and so we're catching more cancers because our diagnostics are getting better. We're catching more cancers because more and more people are taking their pets to the vet. We're catching more cancers because our technology is getting better. I remember when I first started, we rarely did ultrasounds on animals. Now, ultrasounds, CAT scans, MRIs are fairly common. So are the cancers more numerous because we're catching them more because of technology and because they're more like family? Or is it because cancers truly are becoming more common in the dog and cat population? I think it's a combination of them all.
Sure. How young are you seeing in cats and dogs cancer? Is it becoming earlier? I mean, let's say a dog 3 or 4 or 5 years old, as opposed to an older dog.
Sure. I would say sometime we are seeing earlier cancers. It's still, the majority of cancers are middle-aged to older animals. I just saw a dog with oral tumor that was 4 years old. And so that's young. It's heartbreaking.
And what's the success of the chemo? So if you have a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old dog, as you say, we love our pets like family members.
Sure.
Do you do the chemo? Do you not? Because their life is compressed, as you pointed out. If you have a dog or cat that's 4 or 5 years old, yeah, you probably go for it. I mean, there's a whole host of what do I do's.
Sure. And so I would say my favorite expression is age is not a disease. And so just because a dog's 10, 11, 12 doesn't mean you don't do chemo. Just because a dog's 4 or 5 doesn't mean you do. You have to evaluate the risk factors. Chemotherapy, radiation therapy, most therapies in general in animals are well tolerated. And that's on purpose. We as veterinary oncologists, you as pet owners, have made a really conscious choice that we want our pets to have an excellent quality of life for as long as possible. So we have to focus on 2 things when you come see a veterinary oncologist. We have to focus on quantity of life and quality of life. It's not one or the other, it's both. And so the dosages of chemotherapy that we use, the dosages of radiation therapy that we use, are designed to factor in both quantity and quality of life.
Now, that was hard to figure out years ago, was it not?
Oh
when
my God,
when
yes.
there wasn't the field, right?
Correct. But now with, 30 years of my experience and 30 years of the other 300, 400 veterinary oncologists, we've built up a fair amount of data to know how to treat animals. We still have lots to learn, but we're much better at communicating risk-benefit for different protocols for animals with cancer.
Looking back at the 30 years as a vet who does oncology, what has that taught you in life and in your career?
The value of every minute and the value of leaving no stone unturned. So my first dog, Smokey, when he developed melanoma, I literally left no stone unturned. I called everybody I knew, human oncologist, veterinary oncologist, everybody, to make sure that I did everything I could to treat him. And I did. And that was the philosophy of how I built my practice. I want to make sure, no matter what we do, I want every one of our clients to say, I heard all of the options, I knew what all of them were, and I did everything that I could to help my pet.
You feel this to your core,
Absolutely.
don't you?
Absolutely.
I can just tell. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
I love working.
I'm going to switch topics a little bit. The big topic now is dog food.
Sure.
What do I feed my dog? There were 15 or 16 dog foods. They're causing problems in dogs. They're killing dogs. Grain-free seemed to be so organic and the packaging so gorgeous and all of that. Were we lured into something we shouldn't have been?
I'm not sure. So full disclosure, I'm not a nutritionist.
Sure.
I feed my own dogs Blue Buffalo. Full disclosure, I'm on their veterinary advisory board. What I can tell you is about 18 million dogs a year get fed grain-free diets. About 400 of them have developed this heart problem. What the cause is, I don't know that anybody knows. Likely it's multifactorial. I'm not sure it's just related to food, just related to breed. Is it related to genetics and diet? I don't know.
So they're still trying to figure this out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As you continue in your field, what things do you think we're going to find in the next 5 or 10 years in oncology in animals?
Yeah, so veterinary oncology is one of the fields that I think is easy to predict the future. And I say that because veterinary oncology typically follows human oncology by between 5 and 15 years. And so if you look back 5, 10, 15 years, what's been going on in human oncology, that's likely what's coming to veterinary oncology. And so we're likely going to see many more targeted therapies. We're likely going to see the advent of immuno-oncology, so harnessing the immune system to fight cancer. That's the breakthrough that's helped thousands, if not millions, of people worldwide. So that's what I think is coming toward veterinary oncology.
Is the gap getting smaller between?
It is. It is. So it took, let's say, 70 years for chemotherapy to come from people to animals, or 50 years for radiation to come from people to animals. Now that gap is getting much smaller. So the transference of knowledge and information from people to animals is getting shorter and shorter. And in fact, the transfer of knowledge is also going the other way. So techniques that we're developing in veterinary oncology have been used to help people. For instance, the use of limb sparing surgeries for bone tumors was originally developed in dogs and now is routinely used in people. Bone marrow transplants, many years ago, was originally developed in dogs and now is commonly used in people for a variety of cancers.
When you go to conferences, do you sit on panels with oncologists and veterinary oncologists? Are you that close now?
So it's a small community of veterinary oncologists. We all know each other, so we talk all the time.
But are you with MDs as well?
At certain conferences, yes. And that's, again, one of the goals of Animal Cancer Foundation, is to facilitate that conversation.
Because it seems like there should be that conversation.
Absolutely. So that's the field of comparative oncology,
right,
where you're comparing humans and animals and the information that both sides have to the betterment of both. And so that's exactly what Animal Cancer Foundation tries to do for the last 20 years.
Would you predict that man's best friend is going to help cure humans?
I do, without a doubt.
And why do you say that?
Again, because the information that we can get on whether a treatment is working or not for a cancer in an animal whose cancer is so similar to people, we can get that information in a much shorter period of time. We'll know whether a therapy works or doesn't work in a dog, let's say in a year, okay? So you can treat 50 dogs with the same or different types of medications for the same type of cancer and get an answer so much more rapidly than if you had to wait 50 years in a person or 10 years in a person. I also think that because the cancers, remember, dogs live in the same environment that we do. They breathe the same air, drink the same water, in many cases they eat the same food that we do, and so their cancers tend to behave much more like human cancers than cancers in rats or mice.
And is this all types of cancers or just certain ones?
I would say most types of cancers, but if you think of cancers, and the most common cancers that dogs and cats get, think of childhood cancers. Those are the types of cancers that dogs tend to get. Lymphomas, leukemias, brain tumors, bone cancer, soft tissue sarcomas.
When you treat animals and you see one that has gotten well, your thoughts? I mean, it must just be joy, right?
Absolutely. So when people ask, how can you do this? How can you treat cancer day in, day out? It's because of the successes. When an animal comes to you with cancer and you treat it and that animal goes back to having a high quality, long life, what a joy.
And did you do everything you wanted to do in your career, or is there still more to come?
So yes, I've been blessed and lucky and thrilled with the trajectory of my career. I'm still working. I love what I do, and I won't stop doing something in this field, I think, until...
Well, I hope what comes true is that dogs are going to help cure humans.
Absolutely.
Because how wonderful would that be?
That would be fantastic.
Thanks for sharing all your expertise with us.
It has been my pleasure.
Dr. Gerald Post, thank you.
Thank you.
Suits when we're missing. Who's this girl I spend all night kissing? And if Walter's right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm a wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store of my mind. Just to save time, skip right ahead to the last ride.